the first thing I kind of want to talk about and we'll go over is this new Tennessee bill, right? The anti-drag bill. And so let's just get into it because I have it pulled up here. And so obviously this has been promoted as an anti-drag bill, which I read it yesterday. I kind of want to read it out today. We can talk about, just talk about it a little bit because usually when you see something in the news, I've noted you see it all the time. You see that there's a narrative that they're pushing, and so these bills get brought up all the time. And when you go in there and you look at them, you realize that they're not, what the narrative is. I mean, the "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida did not literally mean you can't say gay in Florida, obviously. Um, so, wrong button. So like I said, I kind of want to talk about this and see if I can blow this up for you real quick. But yeah, I kind of want to talk about this bill. So again, this has been promoted as an anti-drag bill or an anti-trans bill because you're saying you can't even cross-dress in public, which seems a little extreme to me. Obviously there are bills that out there, like there's one in Utah, I believe, that is promoting that you can't have, you can't get gender related care like trans care up until like the age of 25. It's banned, which I think is excessive. I think that the 18 is our age of adulthood. If you're wanting to change the age of adulthood, then that's a conversation we can have. But I think if you're an adult, you have self-ownership over your body and you should be able to do with it, as you please. So that's a little bit extreme. But then there's another, misrepresentation of a bill. I believe it was in the Northeast. I forget what state it was in, that they were talking about amending to change ID laws. And when it passed, they said this law, will prevent trans people from existing, prevent trans people from all this stuff. And literally all the law said was that what was designated on your ID did not have to be used for future laws, in terms of like what your gender that you were, on your ID did not have to be used to determine, like what prisons they would send you to and stuff like that. And so, it was just a misrepresentation. But let me see, what is that? This is a good point. So Joanne says, it's been amazing to hear the cognitive dissonance from people complaining about the drag bills, yelling that parents should have the choice while also taking away parents' choice in education. I mean, it's absolutely true. But on the other side, they could say the same thing, is we are taking away parents' choice for this type of stuff, and screeching about education. I would say that, sexualizing kids is not a parental choice. So it's a little bit of a misnomer from the other side. When you look like that, it's like, yeah, taking your kids to a drag show is like taking them to a strip club. I don't know. I've never been to a very, child friendly drag show, and most of the, a lot of what we've seen online, yeah, none of that's good. And then like drag queen story hours, they don't even ban drag queen story hours. The thing about the drag queen story hours is I've kind of always talked about it. They kind of take away they've literally replaced clowns with drag queens, and I don't really think that is promoting the acceptance that they think it is. It just doesn't work like that. But onto the bill. So basically, if you don't know how some of these bills read, I don't know. I don't want to insult my audience, but I also want to. I mean, sometimes, a lot of times in bills, they have a top section to where it explains and gives definitions of stuff, but it's not really what the bill is. And then you have the lower sections, which are what the actual bill is and what it does. Now, this bill is just amending I think it's their adult oriented performances statute anyway. So again, you can't take kids to strip clubs. And so this is just kind of amending that to add in drag shows. So the new language states adult cabaret performances. So that's what they're adding is adult cabaret performances. Means a performance in a location other than an adult cabaret that features topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest, or similar entertainers, regardless of whether or not performed for consideration. So the first thing I thought about when I read this, and I can see where some people are starting to get a little bit worried, is when it says male or female impersonators. Like that would be, does that, because some people would consider me a female Im- imitator or impersonator, right? So some of the extremes might say, I am a female impersonator. And so would I not be able to perform at all? Like, would I never be able to sing or, couldn't even go to karaoke if there was, if it wasn't in a cabaret area. So that's what they're trying to get at, but that's not what it is. And what's really key here, again, is this word prurient. And I had to look this up because it's key to this bill. And so the definition of prurient is marked by or arousing an immoderation or unwholesome interest or desire, especially marked by arousing and appealing to sexual desire. So that's key because it's all about creating sexual desire. So think of a stripper as arousing males. A drag performance would meet that criteria where kids are present because drag is inherently sexual. And so it's a drag bill that basically says that you can't do drag where there are children present, which that makes sense. I actually think that is a good bill. It has nothing to do with trans people or performing or anything like that. But I do question how far this goes, because if Taylor Swift performs at the Bridgestone Arena, which is the arena in downtown Tennessee, and she has, again, drag queens or even trans people in there, again, if you consider trans people female and male impersonators, would that be a violation of the law? Because there would be a reasonable suspicion that Taylor Swift may have kids at her show. I don't know. I think that is going to have to be up for the courts to decide, because the courts eventually will decide this, and how far that goes. It will be, that as soon as this gets signed into law, the ACLU will take it to court, and it will be a First Amendment case, and we'll see what they ultimately decide. I think that they will side on they will probably side to say it's going to be a judgment call, right? Yeah, Joe, that's a good question. So Joe asked, let me see, pop that up. Will Nashville start arresting drag queens at the Pride Parade? That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Now, again, there's a level of interpretation I think that you have to look with this because of that word prurient. It's how sexualized is that performance? So what we've seen in other videos from Texas and Florida, like the one where the Florida they pulled their liquor license and all that stuff. I don't know, because that would absolutely violate this law. But if it is just a drag queen that's not doing any like sexual performances, does that violate the prurient aspect of this law? So I think it kind of goes again into like indecent exposure laws. What would be considered indecent exposure? Um, but it's like I said, I think it's gonna come up to it's gonna come down to what the courts rule, and I think there's gonna be plenty of lawsuits on this to. Unfortunately, there's gonna be a lot of lawsuits on this to see what to see where this is, because there's going to need to be legal precedent set. Now, if you go down a little bit further, it does I kind of skipped this part, and it talks about it is so in sections. This is the new language in the section. So it is an offense for a person to engage in an adult cabaret performance on public property or in a location where the adult cabaret performance could be viewed by a person that is not an adult. And then basically the legalese. So again, I honestly don't think that they're going to be allowed again in Nashville, and I don't think they're going to be allowed to have drag queens period at Pride. And I say that because I've been to Nashville Pride. In fact, Nashville Pride was the first Pride event I've ever been to, and it takes place at their state capitol, which again, that's public property. And then yeah, the parade would be public property as well. No, you're right. So Jeannie says drag in general is not kid friendly from experience. Yes, I've been to a few drag shows. I'm not a huge fan of drag, just everybody knows I can explain that. But the unhinged side of the LGBT need to accept that fact and protect kids at all costs. I agree. So I've also said, I mean, I've said this on other shows. I think you can have kids at Pride, you can have kink at Pride, but you can't have both. And it's the same with drag. Drag is kind of the same as kink, is where you can have kids at Pride, you can have drag at Pride, but you can't have both, because again, drag is inherently sexual. Like Jeannie said, I've been to plenty of drag shows. I don't like drag because it's interesting. I've had this like revelation through my experience with drag. So initially, when I first started to kind of come out and who I was, it was like 2014, 2015 timeframe, even 2016. But it was like drag is what people thought of then as what trans, like that was they were the ones creating the perception of what it was to be trans, and they really have nothing to do with each other. And then between 2017 2018 things start, trans people became more visible, but so trans people became more visible, that perception dropped. But now we have kids at drag shows, and they're now correlating it again with the trans community. Not to mention the trans community has kind of forced their way into the drag community, which is a whole nother thing of itself. I remember when RuPaul had said to be trans and to do drag was like taking performance enhancing drugs. And that makes sense because you have surgeries, you have hormones in it, and it helps your aesthetic, right? When you're transitioning. So now it's all conflated because you have trans people doing drag, you have gay men that are still doing drag. The key is that drag is inherently sexual and should not be around children. I'm with you, Joe. This law is a little bit interesting. I mean, I'm with you. I think that it leaves too much open for interpretation. What will be allowed, but at the end of the day, And again, I think you're going to see some First Amendment stuff, but at the end of the day, um, I think that you are going to see drag taken back into the bars where it probably should have never left. And the only time that you may see possible, not restrictions, but the only time you'll see possible, um, what is it? Maybe at Pride they'll have to get like a permit to do this. I don't know, but I think overall, the law will end up being a good thing because it will protect children from, you know, these. It will end up protecting children and keep them from being sexualized. But it will remain to be seen because again, once this gets passed into law, you know that like the ACLU and everybody else has, um, yeah, you know the ACLU is going to have lawsuits and everything like that. And yes, Joanne, you're right. I think the vagueness is an issue and it might get struck down on that grounds. You're right because it's so vague that they could very well put it into a First Amendment stuff, like the on public property aspect of it. That could very well be a First Amendment. That could be the First Amendment challenge right there. It's like you can't do this on public property, but you have a First Amendment right to do what kind of do stuff on public property. But at the same time, you can't be naked in public. You can't be naked on public property. So there are indecent exposure laws that can be violated too. I don't know. I think I thought the vagueness of the parental choice bill in Florida might get that bill sank too, but it hasn't yet. It's kind of held up. So, this bill, I don't see this. This is one thing I've worked with enough lawmakers to where I know that some of the vagueness gets covered by local ordinances. And so what they will do is they'll put this out, it'll be vague, and then it will be up to the counties or the local city governments to basically enforce and then define what is vague in here. That's kind of how the law kind of works. It's decentralization, which I like, but sometimes when it's so vague like this, it could bring the whole bill down. But again, like I said, I think it's not a bill that they've been claiming it is. It's not this bill that it's not this anti-trans or anti-drag bill. It's literally putting drag back into the bars, which again, we'll see. And like I said, I think the only time that really matters is come like Pride time. Is what do you do during a Pride event? But that remains to be seen. I guess we'll watch this kind of play out.